double jacketing today because I am cold. We are back, another free Friday. Welcome, everyone. Happy that you are here today. And we are continuing the conversation of nutrition. If you missed the last free Friday training, I recommend you go back and have a listen. This is going to be a several part series. I don't know how many we're going to go into. I know today is going to be a shorter free Friday, but we will get to everything in the next coming weeks that I want to share. We're really establishing foundation. We're establishing the principles of nutrition. When we get this concept, I believe it's a game changer, because when we're talking about living healthy, that is the foundation, right? That is the goal, rather. That is what ultimately we want to do, is to establish health as the core principle for our life. So when we're talking about living healthy, nutrition is very, very important. We've got to get this down. We have to learn, how do I establish health in my entire life? And in that, nutrition is foundation. It is super important. It is what drives health. It is what drives the ability for us to live healthy, having the full understanding of how to establish a healthy nutrition foundation, right? So in that, it's the first thing I want to talk about today is food is your friend. Oftentimes when we may be unhealthy, we may be in an unhealthy weight, maybe we're overweight, maybe we're underweight, we don't have the self-image that we'd like, we tend to view food as sort of an enemy. But what I want to encourage today is that food is your friend. We've got to change that belief here. Whatever your belief is today on food is what is actually giving you the result, is what you're actually receiving from that. So today, I really want to encourage you to reevaluate, what is your belief of food? Because again, it goes back to our relationship and our psychological understanding of food. If I view food as my enemy, therefore I am going to literally start to reject the benefits that food brings. And food isn't just fuel. Oftentimes when I ask this question when I'm doing our seminars and we say, well, what is food? The first hand that usually goes up is food is fuel. That is partially correct, because we're not cars, we're not vehicles to where they need fuel to function. We need more than just fuel. We need micronutrients, macronutrients. We need nutrients. That is the core principle, or rather the core definition of what food is. Food is nourishment to our body. Therefore, it's not just fueling us, but it's giving us life. It's giving us the nutrients that our body needs to function, because we're more complex than a car. A car is fairly simple to understand. A body is not so simple, which means that in that complexity, we are profound creations that can do so much that food can supply all of these things. Therefore, food is your friend. Food is what helps you not only stay alive, but function at high levels, function in mental capacity, physical capacities that can far exceed what today is even challenging science, right? It's taking science to other levels to really look at, wow, how is this athlete able to function at this rate, at this ability? How are records being broken? How are now people running miles under low numbers, under I don't know, the 4 minutes or 3 minutes, when we're looking at like 5 miles and kilometers and marathons and all of these things? It's because we're getting to understand more of what actually drives the human body. Food is your friend. You're going to hear that a lot today. Food is your friend. And I really want you to repeat that, write that down, and start declaring that. Because if today there's any disconnection with your belief of food, it's not going to give you the benefits of it. And here, my friends, the goal is for us to benefit from what we put in, which means then if food is our friend, meaning it's important, it gives us life, it's what sustains us, it gives us the ability to function better, to think better, to be in a better mood, to just live better, because it's what sustains us in life, then we also have to look at, well, what am I putting in my body? So one, we got to work on our belief of food, that food is my friend, and therefore what I put into my body is absolutely crucial, because the foods that we put in is what gives us the ability to function, is what gives us the nutrients we need to sustain life, but more importantly, to be able to get to our optimal life capacity, to be at the highest state that we can possibly be. So therefore, when I view food, it's not just, okay, food is fuel, because then that means all foods can be fuel. But here's the kicker. Food is fuel, but when food is nutrients, meaning they're going to make me think better, they can influence how I feel, my emotion. They can influence my ability to do more, to operate at a higher level. That means then the foods that I choose are going to be important, should be important, because health is the goal here. Health is the objective. So therefore, it's not just how much I eat, but choosing the foods that you eat with understanding is super vital, because we're talking about intentionality here, and attention leads to intentionality. So the more attention we can give to this component of really being, having our full attention when we're making food choices, of understanding that now I'm going to be intentional about the foods that I choose, because I am giving more attention to this, understanding that everything that I put into my body is going to send information. And based on that information, my body is going to function. It's going to do whatever I am giving the foods for it to do. So therefore, I've got to be intentional about the choices that I am making. So in that, breaking down the 4 components that we should have with our meals: a nutritious dense protein, a nutritious dense quality carbohydrate, preferably on the low glycemic side, fiber, making sure that I'm getting the vegetables that I need, and also having our healthy essential fats. So this is what is going to drive our health principle, because this is one thing we can control. We can't control our age. We can't control circumstances that might happen in life. We can't control maybe hardships that can come our way. We can't control a lot of things, but what we can control is the choices that we make in terms of our food. We can make the choice. We can pick these foods. And in that, the foods are going to impact our metabolism. They're going to impact, like we talked about yesterday or last week, the energy balances of our body. And if you missed it, again, go and check it out. There's different factors that can actually influence our energy balance, meaning calories coming in and calories coming out, right? That is how we can get to being at a healthier weight, being able to release weight, being able to build muscle, right? If we're consuming more calories than we're burning, well, we're going to gain. If we're consuming less than we're burning, well, then the probability is you're going to release. And in this, it's absolutely important to understand, okay, well, what is metabolism? Because there's a lot of talk, well, it means your metabolism is slow. It means that your metabolism is fast. One has it faster, one has it slower. Well, what does all that mean? Metabolism, simply said, is just, it refers to the chemical processes that are going on continuously in your body that helps you stay alive and function normally. What are all these chemical components, right? It's the chemical processes of everything that the body does to keep you alive, but also to function. And in that, we find BMR, which are basal metabolic rate, which is the energy your body uses also known as calories, your body uses or burns at rest while you sleep to breathe, right? For your organ systems and all of your systems in your body to function. So in this, it's about looking, if we can understand this principle, and today I want to break down what metabolism is and also break down certain things that can influence your BMR. Why? Because when we're looking at energy balance, one of the factors that influences energy balance is your metabolic adaptation, right? And in that, well, what is this metabolic adaptation? Well, it's the things that influence your BMR. And the metabolic adaptation means that when we are consuming excessively less amount of food, well, that is going to kick off our body to go into starvation. Before I break this down, one thing I want to just simply look at is when we understand that food is our friend, when we start to build a healthy relationship with food, we can start understanding the things that are keeping us from either releasing weight or building muscle or just ultimately being healthy. So that means that today, based on where you're at, we've got to go back and look at what am I doing with my food? How am I viewing food and what foods am I consuming? But more importantly, like how am I relating to these? Because when we're in a state of maybe being overweight, oftentimes at the very beginning, it's not so much that they have to stop eating food, but more importantly, that they've got to start eating more of the right food, which means we've got to start looking and evaluating our food choices and start looking at, well, what percentage of my foods are of non-nutritional value? Am I consuming too much processed foods? Am I consuming too much starches? Am I consuming too much bread? Am I consuming high glycemic carbohydrate foods? And that could be, again, breads, that could be sweets, that could be white flour based foods, rice, potato. All of these foods, what are they? Well, they are high glycemic foods, high glycemic carbohydrates, but they are foods oftentimes that don't give us nutritional value. When we're talking about bread, there's very little nutritional value in bread. What do we get? We get fiber. Well, there's other things, other foods that we can consume that'll give us a better substance of fiber. So we've got to look at and start evaluating, and can I start eliminating processed foods, frozen foods, high starch foods, high sodium foods, high glycemic carbohydrates, because those foods, they may have some nutritional value. I'm not saying they don't have any nutritional value. They have some nutritional value. However, it's not adequate. It's not what is going to drive us to be healthy. Because when we're looking at, well, what is the leading cause of obesity? What is the leading cause of people being unhealthy? It is the consumption, the overconsumption of foods with very little nutritional value. They are high calories that are going to, again, make you feel full, make you full, be satiated, but it's not giving you the nutrients that you need to be able to be healthy at a healthy weight, but more importantly, just be optimal. So we've got to reevaluate. So at the very beginning, it's looking at, what foods do I need to remove? And now what foods do I need to introduce? Because food is our friend, right? So eliminating foods that do not benefit me, that don't provide me the nutrients, the adequate sustainability of life that I want. Because again, this is in pursuit of the life that we desire, in pursuit of the life that I want to craft, in pursuit of the functionings that I want to be able to do in life. So in that, it's looking at what foods are keeping me from that life. Can I remove that? Separating myself from it. Not because I am being told to, not because I am telling you you have to do it. It's because I'm understanding that these foods do not benefit me in the life that I want to live. So therefore, I am choosing to say no. I am putting attention to it to be intentional about what I am bringing into my body. More attention. What is sadly happening in the world today. We don't have attention to food because food is viewed as fuel. What do? Okay, anything can be fuel. In the same way that your car, you can stop at the crappy gas station and put the worst fuel that you want. Or if you understand that the fuel that you're putting in is going to affect your fuel injectors, it's going to affect the way your car functions, rather, sorry, it's going to give it more life, well, then you might make a better choice. But more so our body. Because it's not just about fuel, it's about looking at, okay, how can I nourish myself? So therefore, now I evaluate, okay, these foods do not benefit. I'm choosing to say no to these foods. And I am going to put attention to be intentional of every choice that I make with my food. So therefore, now it's my choice because I understand that health is my responsibility. So therefore, I'm going to say no to these foods, processed foods, high sugary foods, added sugars, fried foods, foods that just don't have that much nutrient. And I'm going to say yes to the foods that do provide value and bring nourishments based on the 4 categories that we talked about, right? I want to just establish that. I wanted to come back to make this super important because we got to make this crucial. We got to understand this piece, okay? So now let's look at the things that start to affect metabolic adaptation, meaning that our body, right, starts adapting to what's happening. So if we're consuming excessively less amount of calories, we're giving our body excessively less amount of energy, well, that in our body can start to kick off what's known as a starvation, a signal going off, starvation information that is being sent to the body. Therefore, what the body does is that it starts to go into what's known as famine, right? And what that means is that these foods, or I'm sorry, being in this state, it starts to impact our body in these following ways. And I'm going to explain, give you 2, 4, 5 ways that our body starts to be affected when we are in this state. So the metabolic adaptation means that your body now, adaptation, thank you, baby, or metabolic adaptation means that now your body starts to adapt to what's happening based on what we're doing to it, giving the foods that we're giving it or not giving it the foods that we need, right? So in that, number 1, the first thing that's affected is your BMR decline. So what is then the BMR? We're going to be jumping back and forth here for a moment. So your BMR, again, is the number of calories or energy that your body needs to be at rest, right? To keep you alive. What is that? How much is that? Well, we all have it differently. And that rate, that number varies based on how much body weight we have, how much muscle mass we have. The more lean muscle that we have, the higher the BMR is going to be. Why? Because lean muscle uses more or needs more energy to sustain. That is why when we're looking at the principles of living healthy, it's to build muscle. Because if we have more lean muscle mass, then our body is going to, our metabolism, that's where that comes into play, is going to be higher. It's going to be faster. Why? Because it's using more energy. So when we're not giving the body the adequate amount of food that it needs, well, the BMR starts to decline, meaning that the amount of energy your body needs to sustain life starts to go down, meaning it's not going to use it. It's going to store it because it doesn't know what is happening. So it wants to ensure that it has the proper amount of energy needed for everyday life. So when it kicks off into this starvation, into this famine mode, your body now starts to hold on, which means that now your BMR starts to decline. So it's important to look at, which is why when you're starting your journey, it's looking at, even if I am overeating, most of the foods that I am overeating are processed they're junk food. They're food that don't benefit you. So it's oftentimes not that we have to stop eating, but we have to start eating more of the right food. So we swap foods out to start giving ourselves nutrients. And in that, we then start to activate our metabolism, right? We start to activate our BMR so that it can start functioning. When we've been either in any type of diet that we've been following, whether it was just decreasing the number of calories that we're consuming in a calorie deficit, right? Consuming less than I am using. If we stay in that diet stage for too long, which is why it's important to evaluate. We have to explore. I talked about how nutrition, it's an exploration. It's never a precise one amount, precise, perfect process across the board. So it's looking at when I stay at a calorie deficit for too long, or when I stay dieting for too long, our BMR starts to decline. It starts to decrease. Again, because if we're in that, our body can look at it as, okay, I've been in a deficit for a really long time. Am I in a starvation mode? Am I in a famine? So therefore, our body now starts to adapt to that, and it starts to store. It starts to hold on potentially, right? It can potentially hold on. Now, the truth is that when we are in that phase for way too long, your body ends up going into that place, right? So our body, our BMR starts to decline. The amount of energy you need at rest, it reduces. Now that is going to influence energy out, right? Meaning you're not going to be using, your body's not going to be using as much energy, which is why we may get to a place where we might be stuck if we've been in a process of releasing weight, right? Maybe you've been at it for quite a bit of time. Well, we may need to reassess how much food are we consuming. And if we realize that, yes, I'm stuck, I'm not seeing the scale move, I'm not seeing the inches move, which oftentimes the scale is a bad indicator of that. What we want to look at more is looking at, well, how are my inches? Am I seeing anything change there? Because if I'm also working out and I'm building muscle, well, the scale might fluctuate, right? And it's not necessarily the best indicator, because as I'm still building muscle, well, that is going to also affect the scale. But we can look at inches. So that's going to really be the best indicator for us during this process. But if we do find ourselves that I'm just stuck, I'm not seeing it, well, then we may need to start introducing a few more calories, and that could be between 50 to 100 calories. I'm going to really touch on this next week, where I'm going to be talking about reverse dieting, right? Which is now reevaluating and reintroducing food slowly so that we can, if my BMR has declined, if my metabolism has slowed down because of what I just explained, then we can slowly start to get it to speed up again. Now, this is a process, my friends, and I really want to take time with that next week, because it's a very complex process. It is simple, but complex in its nature, because we're talking about a complex body, right? So now, what are other things that start to be affected when we're in this famine or starvation mode? Well, exercise becomes more difficult. Why? Well, because our body's not using as much energy. Therefore, I don't have enough energy for us to exercise, for me to exercise, for me to really exert, because my body it's not using, it's just storing. Well, it's not going to give me enough for exercise. You have less available energy because my body is holding on to it, right? So the intensity of your exercise might start to diminish. And again, these are good indicators to look at. Has your exercise intensity gone down? Have you been feeling more sluggish? Have you been getting tired faster? Have you been just become more depleted while you're exercising? If that's so, then that might be an indicator that we might be in starvation or famine, right? We may need to start consuming a bit more calories. More on that next week. You also have less energy through exercise, right? So exercises become more difficult, which means you also get tired faster through your exercise process, right? That's doesn't matter whether you're doing cardio, whether you're doing um, uh, muscle building through resistant bands or through weights. Either way, if you start to notice this, and it's going to happen because again, our body has less available calories or less available energy. So as your body gets smaller, it doesn't really require as much fuel, and your metabolism also adapts to make you more efficient. This also reduces the number of calories you burn through movement, resulting in less energy out, right? So this we see as we start to release weight and our body starts to get smaller. Well, it also impacts on, well, how much fuel do we actually need? And so when our body starts to adapt through these processes, if in that we're still giving it less amount, well, it's going to still hold on to some, and it's still not going to give us enough that we need to get us through an exercise, to get us through our workout, right? You may also notice that your daily activities, your NEAT, the things that you do normally throughout the day, you might get sluggish. You might be more tired. You might not have the energy to do that. This is a good indicator that metabolic adaptation is happening, that you might be in that famine. And then your digestion also slows down. Your body absorbs it, the absorption of the nutrients that we're giving it also slows down. So which in that means if it's slow to absorb the nutrients, if it's slow to go through that process, well, it's going to also affect what we put in. Which means if it is slowed in that process and we continue to give, well, it's going to also affect how the body uses and stores that energy, right? So these are indicators, my friends, that if you might be in a famine or starvation mode because you've either been dieting for too long, you've been in a low calorie deficit for too long, or maybe you are just not eating enough. These are indicators that your body might start to signal. But the biggest thing here is that why this happens is because your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, declines. Again, what is that? How much energy your body needs to keep you alive at rest while you're simply doing nothing. And then in that, we also have what we talked about, your thermal effect of food, right? How much energy your body needs to digest food. And then you have your exercise energy that your body needs for exercising. And then you also have your NEAT. So all of these things start to be affected when we are not giving our body the adequate amount of nutrients. And in that, it's also the quality of nutrients that we are giving our body. Okay. So I want to end with this today, my friends. Next week, we're going to really start to break down what other things start to affect your metabolism. And I'll give you just two of these. I've already been talking about some of this. Body size. The larger body that you might have is going to also mean you're going to have a larger BMR. The amount of lean muscle tissue that you have also starts to affect your BMR. And then the amount of body fat that you have, because fat is a bit more sluggish, it's slower in the process of energy, it also starts to affect your BMR. Next week, I want to break down all of these factors that affect your BMR. And then I want to give you a part one of how to start getting into a reverse dieting if you've been in a dieting situation, if you've just been stuck, you're not seeing the inches drop, you're not seeing the results that you would like to be. Well, one of those factors might be this principle, right? We may need to start consuming more calories and looking at how to do that. The process of doing that is extremely vital and extremely important. My friends, thank you so much. Every Friday, remember, this is a community. Share this. My mission is to impact 1 million people to help them live a healthy, a life of freedom through health in a simple, smart, and sustainable way. We can do that together as a community. Share this, have people join in every Friday. And no, more importantly, if you missed last Friday's teaching on part 1 of this, go back. That way you get a full understanding of it together with this week's, and then next week's it's going to be even better. My friends, I love you. Go out, crush it, live your best life. The replay on this will be posted on my YouTube channel. So make sure you check the description there. I'll also add that so you can look at part 1 and follow it all on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much, my friends. I love you. Have a fantastic day. If you have any questions about this before I go, send me your questions to david@davidhernandez.co, david@davidhernandez.co. That way I can get those questions answered for you. I love you. Have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you next week. Peace.